For our 3D, we need fresher concepts. Leo Banner is my name in the printing industry. I recently learned that I am 52 years old. My professional life is ruined by a manager who appeared capable of Trevor Walsh. My son had been at North Peak Engineering. Time for precisely 3 months had spent 16 years standing and observing him shuffle in his glass office through documents. He obviously did not comprehend through the window behind him. I could observe the manufacturing area where the buzz of 8 industrial 3D printers, ideal synchronization for each and every one of those devices, were calibrated. I had documented all of the tolerances in the protocols. Every parameter, every failure, everything originated in my hands, head, and Leo, thank you for the experience. Trevor, what have you done here? Not wanting to take his eyes off his tablet, yet since the market is evolving, we require new viewpoints and innovation that the board desires us to update our strategy. I had taught 3 generations of technicians. I started the department from scratch. Desktop printers to a complete production operation that generated $4 million yearly. But it seems that didn't count as innovation. When would you like me to leave? The end of the week would be the best. Time to ask. Human resources will take care of the facts of the shift. I nodded once. No, I had witnessed shouting without pleading. Teenagers are escorted out in handcuffs for a lower level of dignity than I. I'll actually tidy up my desk, Leo. Would rather you simply take your personal belongings security procedure I completely understood them. Wanted to leave me before. I could record before I depart? Is there anything I should do? Guidelines before I could create their simple changeover? I strolled back to the workstation, went by the devices that had been my life for almost 2 years. Jason, one of my technicians for decades, glanced up from a screen for calibration. Everything is okay. Mr. Banner is excellent, Jason. Please keep those strict tolerances. I grabbed my coffee mug with a picture of my late wife, Karen, and a tiny toolbox that had been mine. Everything else is technical, Father. Manuals, protocol documents, and troubleshooting manuals remained precisely where I was thinking about it, while I was walking. As I approached the exit, I noticed Trevor was looking out his office window. On the phone, most likely already making a call, employment firms searching for my substitute, a younger person less expensive for someone who didn't know what. As they entered, I gave them my, without a word, access card to security. Behind me, the machines continued to hum, for I had begun at North Peak. Engineering in the days before 3D printing, referred to as quick prototyping in the past, we had 2 washing-sized machines. Devices that were barely capable of printing a coffee cup that isn't warped. Despite the rudimentary technology, I saw the potential, but further tools. It was rejected by experts as a novelty. Learnt the software at night, investigating the chemistry of various polymers, comprehension of how temperature and humidity have an impact on the quality of my prints. Karen, my wife, used to joke that I spoke to those devices as though they were human beings. She wasn't incorrect. Every printer has a unique personality, peculiarities of the Stratus. The unit required continuous cooling because it ran hot. The older Dimension printer has been adjusted, had a feed system that can jam if you increase the print speed to more than 60%, discovered how to entice flawless outcomes from temperamental apparatus when the North Peak made the decision to increase. 3D printing, I was placed in charge of the operation, and I wrote the procedures from the beginning each time, calibrating process for each material, describing each maintenance procedure I included, protections in the system that avoided disastrous failures, skilled professionals to identify the early indicators of issues. For 16 years, we had never experienced a full Trevor Walsh had to shut down production. Arrived 3 months ago with a large thoughts on efficiency that he had never implemented a machine throughout his existence, but he had spreadsheets displaying the amount of money the business could save money with more recent apparatus and younger operators. He discussed artificial intelligence and Industry 4. Intellect as if they were magical remedies that would remove the necessity I had attempted to caution him for experience's sake. Regarding the intricacy of our configuration, 8 of the devices weren't only printers. They were a system that was connected. Environmental Material Handling oversees the procedures for quality assurance. Everything hinged on accuracy. Trevor saw only numbers despite the calibration. On his reports, labor, production, and output. The warning's cost-efficiency metrics. Trevor, the indications had been there for weeks, began to doubt my suggestions. He enlisted experts who had never utilized our specialized equipment. He discussed contracting out calibration to automated systems when I clarified the reason that wouldn't function with our existing setup, claiming that I was uncooperative. He urged me to make a modification last week. Record every step we take for the transition. I explained the paperwork to him. What I performed was already present in the system. Not telling him was the most important thing. More on the tolerance, requirements that maintained everything's smooth operation. Existed solely in my. Those numbers weren't put down in memory. Down wherever they were caused by years of experimentation, thousands of test runs with many modifications done at 2 in the morning when no one else was around. I was now sitting in my truck and observing Trevor in the parking lot, the window of his office. Wondering how long it would take me the weekend to spend in my working on a project in the garage that had been unfinished for several months, Karen desired a wooden jewelry box for a long time. Such finely detailed carvings, I never discovered the time to finish it while I worked 60-hour work weeks, and now I did nothing but time on Monday morning. I chose to stay rather than drive to North Peak. Home and smoothed the jewelry box with sandpaper. At 52, I was contemplating what would happen next. Was both too young and too elderly to retire. Quickly begin anew using 3D printing. Small words would spread throughout the sector. Regarding the reason I left, Trevor would ensure of that. My phone rang at around 10 in the morning. Mr. Banner, Jason, we're having some Machine 3's tolerance problems are drifting, and I'm baffled as to why I nearly responded. Nearly walked him via the calibrating process that would resolve the issue. Then I recalled Trevor's remarks regarding younger concepts and new viewpoints. I no longer work there, Jason. Must ask Mr. Walsh, he stated. We'll figure it out ourselves, the manuals said. Have all the manuals we require. The official nearly laughed. Basic operation was addressed in the documentation, and routine upkeep, which it didn't cover, were the few changes that were required. To make up for the building's heating system, the seasonal variations in humidity, the expansion of the concrete floor and contracted when the temperature changed, those modifications were not art. I apologize, Jason, but my hands are tied. I ended the call and returned to my. The jewelry box was on its way. Woodworking Karen would have liked them together. How the illumination flickered across the Tuesday, Jason. The lid has engraved roses on it. Machine 3 was still there when I called again, drifting, and Machine 5 was now visible. Identical symptoms, he sounded on Wednesday. 4 machines were running in desperation. Outside of productions allowed, tolerances was causing quality control to lag, discarding 30% of the things that I didn't respond to his calls after I drove by that Thursday afternoon. I'm heading to the hardware store via North Peak. Store, there were many cars in the parking lot. Did not acknowledge consultants. Most likely brought in troubleshooters to address issues that shouldn't be there. I was applying the final on Friday morning. The jewelry box with a layer of varnish. When the phone rang, it wasn't Trevor. Leo was there. Jason, we should speak. I no longer work for you, in case you forgot. There are some technical issues with the machines. Challenges. We could benefit from your knowledge. Technological issues as a consultant, as if they had contracted the flu or I put down my brush and went for a walk. The morning sun was shining on the window, striking the trees with a precise casting. Karen used lengthy shadows on my garden. To enjoy mornings such as this, what sort of I questioned about production challenges. Nothing we cannot do about quality issues manage, but your advice would be helpful. Nothing that they couldn't manage. If it were true, he wouldn't be phoning me. Could be open to consulting employment. Told Trevor that I charge $200 per hour. Payment in advance in chunks of at least 4 hours. There was a lengthy Leo. That seems like an excessive pause. The emergency market rate. Take it or leave it, troubleshooting took it, and it told me all I needed to know, to be aware of how dire things had become. On Monday morning, I arrived at North Peak and entered using a temporary visitor's badge. Card. The manufacturing area appeared to be 3 machines in the conflict zone were fully turn off their blinking error lights. 5 of them were jogging, but I could hear their motors straining. The erratic cadence that meant Jason greeted me at the door, appearing to have gone days without sleep. Mr. Hello. We're grateful you're here. Tried everything, but it doesn't work. I spent several hours strolling the floor while listening to every machine's check, their control panel's readouts. The symptoms were just as I had anticipated. There was drift in the calibration parameters. Because no one was able to comprehend the environmental compensation elements that I possessed, system integrated, what have you attempted thus far? I inquired, and we adjusted everything in accordance with the guide. Brought in technicians from the equipment manufacturer, even possessed a Stratus's corporate consultant arrived out, and they all agreed that the devices are functioning in accordance. With standards, however, we continue to receive faulty parts. Halfway through, print jobs are failing. The department in charge of quality control is... I nodded, rejecting everything, and pulled. Taking notes on the issues with my phone were falling precisely as I had expected, that Machine 3's drift had been. The coal mine's canary. But now the environmental elements that have an impact on one Trevor, the machine was having an impact on everyone, showed up next to me, appearing uneasy. In his pricey suit, so what do you think? Leo, do you believe we can resolve this? Swiftly, that relies on the modifications you've made. Since I didn't bring anything important, an updated calibration consultant, a few of the software settings created a limited effectiveness enhancements in efficiency, nearly grinned, and showed me the changes you made for the Trevor guided me through the next 2 hours. The changes his consultant made suggested changes to the temperature settings that were intended to cut down on print times, modified feed rates that appeared favorable on paper, but disregarded the facts of our particular software updates for setup that had overridden the custom settings I had spent years honing. Each and every change was incorrect, but not significantly so. However, in subtle ways that would compound over time, similar to modifying a watch for a little while every day, you would ultimately miss your I told the appointment that this could be fixed. Trevor, but it will require time and need to reverse. The majority of what you consultant suggested duration of 2 weeks minimum, possibly more, based on how much the calibration has been damaged. Trevor's face turned pale, and we have directives to fulfill contracts in order to meet our cannot afford to be offline for 2 weeks, then you ought to have considered it. Prior to dismissing the individual who I saw him and grasped your system, procedure whereby the computation is being performed, the price he paid to keep me behind his gaze on for 2 weeks as a consultant, the price of canceled and missed deliveries, agrees to pay for the explanation of his boss, the reason the 3D printing division had come to a stop. What would you have to fix this? He requested complete access to authority for all systems to make any adjustments that I think are required and no, your other consultants meddling. I finished and spent the remainder of the day recording each's present condition machine creating a strategy for repair that would gradually restore the system to steadiness. But as I worked, I came to understand I was taken aback by something. They had not only adjusted my calibration parameters, which they had altered in a manner that made the system entirely reliant on ongoing manual modification without a person who was aware of the fundamental connections between temperature, humidity, material movement, and the machine's print quality. Would never run frequently, Trevor had not simply fired, he had shattered something that might not readily repaired Wednesday morning. I was Machine 7's calibration when I realized something that made me stop cold. That the machine's maintenance record revealed upgrades for software that I hadn't approved, that someone had visited the system after I departed, making modifications to fundamental elements that governed how the machines exchanged messages with one another. Jason, who installed these, was summoned over. He glanced at the screen for updates. Mr. Walsh frowned and brought in a last week, A consultant from Nexora Labs, a firm, stated that he may enhance our network productivity in Nexora Labs. I was unaware of them, but that they also made complex adjustments. Complex for an unidentified consultant, efficiency wasn't the focus here. It was I invested money on developing a vendor reliance. Delving through the system for the next hour logs that adhere to the electronic breadcrumbs, what I discovered chilled my blood. The consultant did more than simply upgrade software. He had set up instruments for remote monitoring. This allowed Nexora Labs to access our calibration parameters and manufacturing data our complete production. Jason, where is the contract for the process? Mr. Walsh's consultancy work has all, that's why I didn't respond instead. I went to knock on Trevor's door. I must view the Nexora Labs via his door. Trevor looked up from his contract. Computer irritated. Why are updates creating issues? Simply, show me the contract that he displayed. On his screen, and he rotated the monitor towards me, confirming what I observed. Despite my wildest fears, Nexora Labs was not an advisory firm. They were a 3D, a direct printing service bureau rival to our production operation. The agreement was set up as an agreement for systems optimization. But buried in the technical details was a language that allowed Nexora to our quality-related production data. For the sake of confidence, they weren't attempting. They were undermining our efforts to fix our machines. Them, while pilfering our intellectual property. Trevor, you've been taken advantage of. I turned his, what are you talking about? Monitor back at him, emphasizing. The pertinent components of this business are not attempting to assist you. Instead, they are placing. Look at them. You're out of business. Trevor's website displayed Nexora's website. They had case studies on their homepage, from businesses that had moved away from 3D printing in-house to outsourcing manufacturing firms similar to those in the North Peak at the installed software updates are made to create your machines. I clarified that they weren't trustworthy, yet they are gathering your production information in order to recognize the needs of your customers. When your machines eventually break down fully, they will be flawless, able to provide you with a comprehensive service substitute. Trevor's face was fixed on the screen, alternating between bewilderment, rage, and there may have been some fear involved, but that would imply that you were dismissed after being duped by experts. The lone individual who could have discovered it, I saw him early enough to stop it. Understand the implications of this, not only for the production division, but for his professional life. He had spent 3 months at North Peak, long enough to accept accountability for choices, but not enough time to assign blame. Institutional issues. Can you resolve this? He said softly. Maybe, but not. This will be necessary in 2 weeks. Rebuilding the software from scratch, building infrastructure from the ground up, we are. How much would months of work cost? That cost? I didn't respond right away. I had Karen's jewelry box on my mind, sitting at home, done, on my workbench. Considering 16 years of devotion that had given me nothing at all, thinking about newer concepts and viewpoints that vary, I concluded. If you wish to correctly solve this, or if you wish to continue acting, that experience doesn't significance for the first time since I had Trevor Walsh, who I knew seemed sincere. I walked out of Trevor's office terrified, without providing him with a response. Instead, I spent the afternoon recording all that I had discovered, screen grabs of the unapproved copies of the software installs. A thorough analysis is contracted by Nexora Labs. Of the manner in which the sabotage was executed that night, I gave my old Marcus Wright, a friend who worked in a Fortune 500 company's corporate security. Marcus began his work with the organization as a machinist before to entering the field of cybersecurity. He was aware of both worlds, and I'm glad to hear how your retirement is going. I'm not retired, but I do have dismissed, and I believe I have discovered something that could be of interest to you. Describe the circumstances that led to the sabotage of data theft. the deliberate destruction of our ability to manufacture. Marcus sat quietly and listened, making technical inquiries that informed me he realized the ramifications of this. "Greater than your business alone," he stated. "If Nexora is doing this when I'm done, they are most likely doing it to you in order. To another industrial sabotage of this magnitude, what would happen if it were federal crime territory? You keep a record of everything, yet you don't inform them that you are aware of whether they acknowledge that you have mastered their strategy. They're going to stop operating and go, but what about our North Peak? Agreements to complete that are not your issue, no longer recalling that you were fired." Even if he was correct, it didn't feel right. Jason had, along with the other technicians, not related to Trevor's awful choices. They were decent individuals who deserved better than to witness their corporate destroys the department. The following morning, I arrived at espionage. I discovered a proposal from North Peak. Trevor in his office, appearing to have not getting any sleep. "I've considered your predicament. I can repair this," I informed him, "but it must be completed my way." "What are you suggesting?" "Total cessation of 3D printing. We inform everyone about the operation for a week. It is for planned upkeep during I completely rebuilt the software that week. System from the beginning with pristine backups prior to your consultant's alterations. We will lose a week of downtime. Hundreds of thousands of missed deliveries below Nexora are thefts. From you each day, they're not simply destroying your devices, they're copying your half of the customer data, develops your production procedures. You maintain daily contact with their system. They continue to construct their Trevor's competitive advantage was his silence. What would this long-term cost? $50,000, in addition to a letter of apology to my technicians for the previous chaos. 250,000 weeks? That is absurd. No, that's what an emergency is. Remediation of industrial cybersecurity expenses. You can either pay me or when they offer to take Nexora's ransom next to your manufacturing contracts. I observed him for a month. Figure. 50,000 was pricey, but not as opposed to losing the whole 3D printing process, and I was speculating that he didn't want to tell his supervisor how he had the business compromised by the competition is wonderful, but I want to make sure I promise that this will work here. If I am unable to get your machines to operate at complete capacity in a week, you don't give me a aroma that afternoon. I began the shutdown each machine individually. Went dark for anyone observing from the outside. It appeared to be usual maintenance, but I was operating on patience. Removing the cancer from Nexora installed in our system, I put in 18 hours of effort. Days spent re-establishing calibration procedures, recovering backup files from my memories testing. Each network component I had clean systems operating by Friday, servers. But I wasn't finished yet. For Nexora Labs, I had one more surprise in store. Additionally, on Monday morning for Trevor Walsh, I energized the devices using their updated software for each printer that arrived online with ease. Their calibration, settings that are flawlessly locked into the manufacturing floor, was humming with the rhythmic synchronization that I recalled from 16 years of meticulous adjustment. But the network was hosting the show. Traffic before, to deleting Nexora's program, I had changed how they collected data. Routines rather than sending our production information to their servers the machine was gently feeding them, created incorrect part specs and disinformation. Entirely fictitious customer needs, fictitious production challenges. I contacted Trevor at 10 a.m. Everything is moving towards the production sector. Running flawlessly, I informed him in full, restoring production capacity. Trevor surveyed the floor, observing new print jobs are loaded by technicians into devices that were inactive for a week. His expression of relief was, "It's clear how long this will go on forever. So long as no one downloads anything without permission." I gave him a flash drive and software once more. Drive, which includes the documentation for Nexora Labs' entire process of system dates, times, and data evidence. I also sent a report about theft. To the Cybercrime Division of the FBI, Trevor's cheeks turned pallid in the morning. Federal law prohibits industrial sabotage. Criminal activity, particularly when it involves theft of trade secrets across states believed they might find interesting. The economic strategy of Nexora, however, implies indicating that Nexora Labs will soon have when the FBI raids on a really bad day. Their offices, which they will locate servers containing stolen information from businesses that are similar to ours and whose the same error you made was made by executives. I observed him considering the ramifications, not just the legal repercussions for Nexora, but the humiliation of describing to his supervisor how he had almost ruined the 3D printing division by having faith. "What happens now?" he questioned the crooks. Silently, "Your machines are operating flawlessly now. Your production data is safe, and you discover that you shouldn't fire those who truly comprehend your business." Began to move in the direction of the exit. "Oh, and Trevor, please make it when you write my check. I have reached out to Leo Banner Consulting. Chose to launch my own 3 weeks later. I was in my business completing the garage workshop discusses. A project including specialized tooling for a customer in Phoenix. At the time of the announcement, federal agents had raided Nexora Labs. Agents that their executives were dealing with, industrial espionage, computer charges, theft of commercial secrets, and fraud evidence had been found during investigation. That systems had been sabotaged at more around 40 manufacturing businesses throughout that afternoon, the country Jason called. "Did you see the news, Mr. Banner?" "I did. Nexora may have stolen, they claim. Data worth millions of dollars, that is. Crazy espionage that isn't actually industrial is a larger company than most people realize. Acknowledge that Mr. Walsh has been inquiring regarding, I believe he wants to apologize to you. Grinned and informed Mr. Walsh that apologies are not charged, but seeking guidance $200 per hour every week. And after a while, I received a call from a tiny aerospace business in Springs in Colorado that they had heard about what was place at North Peak during contacts in the industry. They needed someone to establish a new 3D printing business for certain parts. We wish to start this as soon as possible. The owner warned me not to take any shortcuts at first. Solid engineering, no shortcuts, and dependable mechanisms that seem to, I drove out to help with things. Colorado on Monday of next week. Karen's My Truck's properly packed jewelry box. I intended to present it to my daughter at the time. Karen would have been there when I visited her in Denver. Enjoyed that her jewelry box brought delight to another someone in the aerospace. The business's space was tidy and well-maintained, arranged in a manner where details were important, where experience was more important than catchphrases. Seemed like a suitable starting point for the following chapter.